Hi, I'm Heidi from StoneGnome.com. I hope you will join me for a little cowl and make an infinity scarf with me. Did you see the introduction for this cowl? If not, you need to see that first. You will also need to make the sample that is presented in the introduction, because the sample will tell you if you have the right yarn and especially if you have a hook that works well for you. In the introduction video I mentioned a hook size 5mm and yarn with yardage 210 meter per 50 gram. This is the hook and yarn that works well for me. If something similar works well for you too, then you will need up to 250 gram of yarn for a big scarf and 200 gram for a medium-sized scarf. If you have a much smaller hook or a much heavier yarn, your yarn usage might be a lot different. You can use a scale to keep an eye of your yarn usage and adjust the width of the scarf accordingly. Congratulations! If you have made a sample with your right yarn and the right hook, you actually have what you need to work on the scarf. So let's have a closer look at the sample that you have made and I made here. Just remember, I'm using a heavier yarn here and a heavier hook, a bigger hook, so you can see what I'm doing. The front should look like this, and if you look at the wrong side, the stitches should look like this. They should kind of fold out from inside of each other. It's pretty difficult to do right every time. You might have some stitches that are coming out from next to another stitch. And the reason why this happens is because there is this bar at the back of a stitch between the legs, and you need to insert your hook before that bar. If you're right-handed, that is on the right side of this bar in the back. Now, if all of your stitches are misplaced, then you should probably try to make another sample. If you find it very difficult to do it right, then you can consider to make all your stitches come out next to each other instead of coming out from in between each other. That will be okay. It won't look like the front side, but at least it will be looking, all the stitches will be looking similar at the back. If you only have a few of these mishaps, then consider yourself very lucky, because it actually took me quite a while to get them placed right almost all the time. And I still turn my work around once in a while when I'm doing this, because I need to check if I will frock a part and if I have mishaps like this. About the misplaced stitches, what I like to do is that I like to use the lip and nose and insert my hook like this. This helps me getting on the right side of the bar in the back. If you are using the head, it would be natural to point it in this direction. So what you can do is that you can turn your work a little bit like this, and then when you insert the hook here, it's easier to get in on the right side of the bar in the back. Maybe you can feel the back bar with your left hand. If you have any more tips for others for using the head like this and placing the stitches right, then please tell the rest of us and make a comment. Now bring forward your sample that you made with the yarn and hook of your choice. Bring also your measuring tape. Now you need to figure out how many stitches you have within 10 centimeter or 4 inches. And you do this by placing the measuring tape in the middle of your work, not too close to the edges or to the borders. And then count 1, 2, 3, 4, and you need to count waistcoat stitches as well as chains. Then you get a number and you write that number down on a piece of paper. I got 19.5 stitches. Try measuring in several places to get a more accurate number. We need more than 19.5 stitches to be able to make the whole scarf. Actually, for a big scarf, we need 18 times 10 centimeter, 18 times the amount of stitches we have within 10 centimeter or 4 inches. And then you need a calculator to figure out how many stitches you need. Now write down this number here. And if you're not making a big scarf, you will make a smaller version, and that is 14 times how many stitches you have within 10 centimeters. Figure that out using a calculator. You get a number and you write that down. We figured that we needed to start with maybe 351 stitches. The thing is, the stitch pattern in the end of the scarf has repeats of 8 stitches. And this means that you need 8 stitches and then you start over again with the same pattern again with the next 8 stitches. So we need to make sure that the amount of stitches that we are using in the scarf actually works with these repeats and is divisible by 8. And in this case I do not get an integer, so I need to adjust the amount of stitches I start with so I'm able to divide by 8 and get an integer. I'm very close to 44 repeats here. So if I just pretend it says 44, I'll see what happens. Let's say I want to start with 44 repeats, and the repeats are 8 stitches, and that will give me a total of 352 stitches. It's just one stitch from the amount that we initially thought we were going to start with. So this is the key number. This is the one that you need to write down, and this is the amount of stitches that you will initially do in the chain row. For those working on a smaller scarf, it's exactly the same. You still have repeats of 8, so you need to test if the amount of stitches will work with the repeats. And also in this case, I do not get an integer. This is not a whole number. It's very close to 34 now. So if we pretend that we will try with 34 repeats, and the repeats are 8 stitches each, then we get 272 stitches. And this will be the amount of stitches. To help you out, I have created a little cheat sheet here. And if you are lucky, your gauge is present on the list. And then you know how many chains to do in the initial chain row. Now you know how many stitches you need to start with. So let's start doing the scarf. As usual, I'm using a heavier yarn and heavier hook. And I'm using this no knot method, but you should just do as you're used to. So, we'll start by doing a chain row. And I will make, I've made 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Now I'm actually letting go of my loop. I'm finding my first loop here, my first chain, and I'm inserting the hook here and then reattaching the first loop. The reason why I do this is now I can easily continue making chains, but I know that my chain row will not be twisted once I'm ready and got all the chains I need and want to join the two with a slip stitch. Like this. Now I have a not twisted ring, and this is very good when you have such a long, when you need such a long chain row as we do now. Keep working on your chain row, count, 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 and once you have joined it, try counting it again. You need to make sure that you got the right amount of stitches. Next thing we will be working on is the border here. And it adds a little bit of weight to the scarf. It's slightly bold and it's very, very soft. And if you pull it, it's also kind of stretchy. Of course, if you don't want this border, if you for some reason are doing something else, attaching this to the sleeve of an arm or something, then you can skip the next 2 rounds for making a border. To make the border, you will need some stitch markers or some paper clips so you can find the stitches several times, because we're going to hook into the same stitches several times. I'm turning my work over so I can see the back bumps. And I'm going to find the first one and hook into that one. And now I'll be doing a slip stitch, and that's what we're doing all the way. I will hold on to my yarn here so I can pull through both loops at the same time, like that. I need to be able to find this stitch again, so I'm inserting a stitch marker. And make sure that you place a stitch marker on before the yarn here, because else it will be difficult to find the right place for inserting the hook later. This is not good. Make it put it to the right side. Let's do the next stitch as well, hooking into this one. Yarn over, holding my yarn and pulling through. And I will also mark this one with a stitch marker. You should mark maybe 5 stitches, because you need to find these again, and in the beginning it's actually very difficult to figure out what stitch to hook into. As soon as you get used to recognizing the stitches, it will seem a little bit more easy. It will be a little bit more easy to find the stitches. So I'm continuing the slip stitches, trying to make sure they are just as loose or not loose as my original chain row. I'll just keep going all the way. Now I've almost done all of my many chains, so I'll just do the last 2 here. And there's one more. Now I'll just do a little sanity check to see if my chain row looks not twisted, because you could potentially twist this around so everything is twisted anyway. Now I need to hook into the same stitch as I did last time, and I'm locating the stitch and removing the stitch marker. Now I'm inserting the hook, and I'm doing another round of slip stitches exactly like before, and I'm reattaching the stitch marker. We will need to hook into this once more, and when we do that we will also hook into another loop right next to it. But we'll just mark this one for now, that will be fine. There's one more. I found the loop. I'll hook into that and make a slip stitch. And make sure to reattach my stitch marker. If you just let the stitch markers stay while you do this, you don't know what side they're going to be when you do the yarn over, and so you could actually potentially have your stitch markers placed somewhere where it looks weird when you get back. When you get used to this, then look for something that looks like a chain row here. That's your slip stitches that you did in the first round. And if you just turn them back, you can see some loops here. And these are the ones that you need to hook into in the second round as well. You already hooked into those once when you did the first slip stitch row. Be careful to just take one loop in this round and make slip stitches once more all the way round. Now you can see that you got something here that looks somewhat similar to an I-cord. And now I'm almost done with my second row for the border. I just need 2 more stitches here. And this one. Now we're almost ready to work on the basic stitch pattern. First we need a transition round, which will prevent 2 big gaps between the border and the rest of the scarf. This round will be slip stitch, chain, skip the next stitch. So I'll hook into the same stitch where I just did the border twice, but I'll also try to locate a loop here in the back that I can hook into. It tightens my work more to this border. I'll remove the stitch marker and remember to reattach this afterward. I'll hook into this one, and then I'll find a loop right below it to hook into as well. And I always start with a slip stitch, like this. Now you can see there's a tiny gap down here because I just hooked into these 2 loops here, and this is where we will insert our hook next time. Now I'll reattach my stitch marker, or maybe another one. This one broke. So yeah, now I'm going to skip the next stitch because I'm going to make a chain like that, skipping this one. Maybe you have some more stitch markers here, but else maybe you can locate the stitches by now. You can see here's my last round of stitches, and right behind them I have the loops here, and these are those that I want to hook into. I'm inserting my hook into 1 and 2 of those, like that. And doing another slip stitch, making a chain, skipping the first, and inserting my hook into the next 2 loops here. And that's what we're going to do for the whole round. I came all the way around now, and lucky me, I had an even number of stitches, so it works like this. I have a chain and I need to skip the next stitch here. If you don't have an even amount of stitches here, then count your stitches, and if you're missing one stitch, that can happen when you join in the ring, then you just add the missing chain whether or not there's a stitch to skip here. Now I'll find the first place where I put the stitch marker here, and I need to figure out where to hook in now. I will hook in actually where I hooked in last time. It's in this hole here. And I'll better show you. I'll just hook in here, same place as where I put my stitch marker. And we can remove this one just briefly. Now I'm going to start my stitch pattern, and for the first row I will be doing single crochet and chain, single crochet and chain. So I'm doing the single crochet stitch around the slip stitch we did before. You can see this is a single crochet stitch. Once more, chain, skipping this hole we have here, and there I can see I'm actually hooked in before here, so I'm going to do that again. And this might seem a little bit mysterious, right? But when you get used to it, you can actually locate those places where you inserted your hook before pretty easy. And you don't have to open it that much when you get used to this. I'll show you. I know it's right here. Let's check. Yeah, it's right here. This is where I inserted my hook previously. So I'm doing that again. I just need to make a little note here and tell you that you need to make sure that your crochet stitches here are of the usual size of a single crochet stitch. Watch out that you don't accidentally make them a lot bigger than what you're used to. Now I'll just continue. I've started working on the basic stitch pattern now, and I'm doing single crochet stitches and chains all the way. Now I got all the way around, and I can see that I have found the first single crochet stitch I did. I also made the chain that was needed here. Now we'll do the basic stitch pattern, and that's a waistcoat stitch and a chain. Then we skip one, do a waistcoat stitch in the single crochet stitch, chain, waistcoat stitch, chain, and so on. And as soon as I've done the first one here, I need to remember to mark this so I know this is where my round starts. So I'll use my lip here, lip or nose of my hook. You can see more about that in the introduction as well if you haven't seen it yet. Now I'll mark this stitch so I know where my round starts, and I will move this stitch marker up accordingly when I'm getting more rows here. I do a chain, I do a waistcoat stitch here, and I will continue with this pattern all the way. It is difficult to place the stitches right every single time, but this basic stitch pattern is very good for practicing. Check your work once in a while. Maybe you can add a stitch marker while you're working. Then you continue doing your stitches here. And when you think you have enough, turn your work around and check if your stitches are placed right. If they're placed right, you can move the stitch marker into the current stitch. This will prevent too much frocking while you're doing this. It is very difficult in the beginning, trust me, but this is a good chance of figuring out how to do this before we do the next parts of the scarf. I have a little tip for you here too. You should try to push your stitches together, like here. Push them together a little bit before you yarn over and pull through. And the reason is that you made the border down here, and it might try to pull your stitches more apart than they should. And we need to have the same tension and gauge as we had in our sample. So if you can push your stitches together just a little bit to try and get the same tension that you had in your sample, that would be excellent. I will continue making more rounds, and when I reach the end of a round, I will work in a spiral and immediately continue with the next round. I will move the stitch marker up so I can always find the first stitch. Now I just need to figure out how many rows to make. A large version of this scarf would be around 30 centimeter wide, and that's 12 inch. A smaller one might only be 25 centimeter. Each of the cable-like stitch patterns take up space less than 10 centimeters, less than 4 inches. So all the leftover space can be used for the basic stitch pattern in the beginning and in the end and in the middle. My suggestion is that for a big scarf, you use the first 4 centimeter, 1.6 inch for the basic stitch pattern. And if you're making a smaller sized scarf, then it's just around the half. That was all for today. If you're making a big scarf, there should be plenty of stitches to work on now. Next time I will show you the first cable-like stitch pattern. I will also show you how to change color in case you need that. If you need help, you can check the notes on my blog StoneGnome.com, or you can join my Facebook group StoneGnome Crochet. I hope to see you again. You can subscribe below to follow me here on YouTube. Thank you for watching.